within the heart of the Whispering Woods, where the branches of ancient trees interlaced like protective fingers, lived Pip. Pip was a tiny harvest mouse, no larger than a ripe plum, with soft golden-brown fur and round, dark eyes that held the curiosity of the entire world. His home was a snug, dry hollow inside the roots of an old oak tree, lined with thistledown and dried lavender. As the long, golden days of late August began to shorten, Pip felt a subtle change in the air, a cool whisper that spoke of long nights and deep sleep. Every evening, Pip would sit at the threshold of his oakroot home, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a blaze of amber and violet. The summer had been kind, filled with sweet wild strawberries, warm breezes, and the gentle chatter of crickets in the tall grass. But now, the green leaves of the canopy were beginning to show edges of copper and gold, and the wind carried the crisp, clean scent of damp earth and fallen acorns. The forest was preparing to rest, and a quiet, sleepy stillness was slowly settling over the hills. Pip remembered a story his grandmother used to tell him about the legendary Last Firefly of Summer, a magical insect named Lumina. It was said that Lumina carried the very last spark of summer's warmth in her golden glow, a light so pure that it could ward off the chill of the coming autumn. If the firefly was not found, the forest would plunge too quickly into a dark, cold slumber. Pip knew that he must go on a quest to find this final ember, to ensure that the transition into winter would be gentle and warm. Taking down his tiny moss-green leaf cloak from a wooden peg, Pip wrapped it snugly around his shoulders and tied the stem around his neck. He packed a small shoulder pouch made of woven grass, placing inside a few dried hazelnut kernels and a thimble-sized gourd filled with fresh water. With a deep breath and a determined nod, he stepped out of his cozy hollow and onto the soft, mossy forest floor. The twilight was deepening, and the first stars were beginning to blink in the velvet sky. The forest at dusk was a place of soft transitions, where the creatures of the day were settling down and the animals of the night were just beginning to stir. Pip walked along a path lined with wild heather, which glowed with a faint, purple light under the rising moon. The dry leaves under his tiny paws made a rhythmic, comforting rustle as he walked, sounding like a soft lullaby whispered by the earth. He felt small in the vast woods, but his heart was filled with a warm, steady purpose. Before long, Pip saw a warm, amber light flickering ahead through the hazel bushes, coming from a clearing under a large, hollow birch tree. He walked closer and found the cozy home of Barnaby, the old badger, who was sitting on a rustic wooden bench carved from a pine log. Barnaby was a large, gentle creature with thick black and white striped fur and a warm, grandfatherly smile. He wore a tiny, hand-knitted red scarf around his neck and held a steaming clay mug between his large, clawed paws. Pip approached the old badger, the scent of chamomile and honey drifting from the mug and instantly making him feel safe and welcome. Barnaby looked down at the tiny mouse with a friendly nod, his deep, rumbling voice sounding like the distant rolling of summer thunder. Pip explained his quest to find Lumina, the last firefly of summer, before the cold wind took over the woods. Barnaby listened quietly, nodding his head as he took a slow, thoughtful sip of his tea, understanding the importance of the little mouse's journey. Barnaby set his mug down on the log and told Pip that the path ahead would grow dark and cold, but he must not lose heart. He advised the tiny mouse to follow the sweet, sleepy scent of night-blooming jasmine, which only opened its petals when the moon reached its highest point. Barnaby then reached into his pocket and handed Pip a small, polished hazelnut shell filled with sweet honey, a gift to keep his strength up. Pip thanked the wise badger warmly, feeling re-energized by the encounter. Leaving the badger's clearing, Pip felt the temperature drop slightly as he walked deeper into the misty valley where the flowers bloomed. The night air was cool and crisp, but the honey from Barnaby tasted sweet and warm on his tongue, giving him the energy to press on. The stars were now fully bright, casting a silver glow over the forest path and illuminating the delicate white flowers that grew along the borders. The world felt peaceful and vast, wrapped in a blanket of silent, starlit wonder. The sounds of the night forest began to surround Pip, not as frightening noises, but as a gentle symphony of the dark. He could hear the wind singing a soft, low melody through the branches of the tall pines, and the distant, comforting hoot of an owl. A family of field mice rustled in the dry grass nearby, whispers of sleep and comfort passing between them as they curled up. Pip walked in harmony with these sounds, feeling like a small but essential part of the forest's grand sleep. Soon, the path led to the banks of the whispering stream, where the water flowed lazily over smooth, round stones, reflecting the silver moon like a ribbon of stars. The water looked wide and cold to the tiny mouse, and he realized he had no way of crossing to the other side. Pip stood at the water's edge, his paws slightly damp from the heavy night dew, wondering how he would continue his search. He looked around for a shallow path or a fallen branch, but saw nothing. As he stood there, the water rippled softly, and a sleek, wet head popped up from the stream, surrounded by a ring of silver bubbles. It was Kaylin, the river otter, whose dark brown fur glistened like wet river stones in the moonlight. Kaylin had friendly, sparkling eyes and a playful twitch to his whiskers that instantly made Pip feel at ease. The otter swam closer to the bank, his movements smooth and silent, asking the little traveler what brought him so far from home. Pip explained his mission to cross the stream and find the last firefly before the cold winter winds locked the forest in ice. Kaylin listened, his whiskers twitching thoughtfully, and then smiled a warm, reassuring smile that made Pip feel hopeful. The otter swam over to a nearby patch of water lilies and nudged a large, round green leaf with his snout, floating it toward the bank. Kaylin told Pip to climb aboard, promising to guide him safely across the deep water. Pip stepped carefully onto the lily pad, finding it surprisingly sturdy and dry under his feet, and sat down in the very center. Kaylin took the stem of the leaf gently in his mouth and swam backward, pulling the tiny mouse across the calm, glassy surface. The water was so still that it felt like floating through a dream, with the reflection of the stars sliding beneath them. Pip watched the ripples fade into the darkness, enjoying the cool, refreshing mist on his face. The crossing was peaceful and quick, and soon the lily pad bumped gently against the mossy bank on the opposite side of the stream. Pip stepped off the leaf and thanked Kaylin for his kindness, the otter giving a playful splash of his tail before disappearing into the dark. Pip looked ahead and saw that the forest on this side was denser, with ancient pines that reached up to touch the starlit sky. The scent of pine resin and damp earth was thick and comforting. As Pip walked deeper into the pine forest, the shadows grew longer and the silence became more profound, wrapping the woods in a quiet blanket. He could feel the sleepiness of the earth beneath his feet, the moss damp and soft like a thick carpet. The wind had died down to a gentle whisper, and the only sound was the occasional cracking of a twig underfoot. Pip kept his leaf cloak wrapped tightly around him, pushing forward despite his growing tiredness. His tiny legs were beginning to ache, and he wondered if he would ever find the warm spark of the legendary firefly. He sat down on a soft patch of moss beneath a towering pine tree, taking a small sip of water from his gourd. The silence of the forest was comforting, and he closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the heartbeat of the woods. He knew he could not stop for long, for the forest needed the firefly's warmth. Suddenly, a soft, silver light began to flutter among the dark ferns ahead, moving in gentle, looping patterns that caught Pip's attention. He stood up quickly, thinking it might be Lumina, and walked toward the light with quiet, hopeful steps. As he drew closer, he saw that it was not the firefly, but Celeste, a large, beautiful moth with wings of shimmering silver. Celeste danced gracefully in a beam of moonlight, her movements as light and silent as falling snow. Celeste paused her dance and landed softly on a broad fern leaf, her wings vibrating with a gentle, rhythmic hum that sounded like a lullaby. She looked at Pip with her large, dark eyes, her long antennae twitching as she sensed the little mouse's presence. Pip introduced himself and explained that he was looking for the last firefly of summer to help the forest transition peacefully into winter. Celeste fluttered her wings in understanding, her silver dust sparkling in the air. Celeste spoke in a soft, whispering voice that sounded like dry leaves scraping gently against stone, telling Pip that she had seen Lumina. She explained that the firefly was resting near the ancient stone ruins on the hill, where the night-blooming jasmine grew thickest. Celeste offered to lead the way, promising to fly slowly so the tiny mouse could keep up with her in the dark. Pip felt a wave of relief wash over him and thanked the silver moth. Celeste took flight, rising above the ferns like a floating lantern, her wings casting a soft, silver glow that lit the path ahead. Pip followed close behind, his eyes fixed on the shimmering trail of silver dust that drifted down from her wings. The light made the dark forest look magical and inviting, turning the shadows into friendly shapes and the moss into a glowing carpet. They traveled together through the quiet woods, a tiny mouse and a silver moth. The path began to slope upward, winding through ancient stone arches that were covered in climbing ivy and soft, glowing green moss. These were the ruins of an old structure, now reclaimed by the forest and turned into a sanctuary of silence and peace. The air here was warmer, protected from the wind by the thick stone walls and the dense canopy of leaves above. Pip could smell the sweet, intoxicating scent of jasmine, just as Barnaby had described. The scent of the night-blooming jasmine grew stronger with every step, a sweet and heavy perfume that made Pip's eyelids feel heavy and warm. The white, star-shaped flowers clung to the old stones, opening their petals to the moonlight and releasing their sleepy fragrance into the air. Pip had to shake his head to keep from drifting off to sleep right there on the path. He knew he was very close to the end of his journey. Celeste flew up to the top of a ruined stone arch and landed, gesturing with her antennae toward the center of the courtyard. In the middle of the clearing, surrounded by a ring of wild ferns, grew a single, magnificent night lily, its pale petals fully open. From the heart of the flower, a warm, golden light was pulsing softly, casting a gentle, amber glow over the stone walls. Pip's heart swelled with joy, he had finally found Lumina. Pip approached the night lily with soft, reverent steps, careful not to make a sound that might startle the sleeping firefly. The warmth radiating from the flower was incredible, like the heat from a hearth fire on a cold winter night, melting the chill from Pip's bones. He looked into the center of the lily and saw Lumina, a delicate creature with gossamer wings and a belly that glowed with a steady, golden light. She was resting peacefully. As Pip stood there, Lumina slowly stirred, her golden light pulsing a little brighter as she sensed the presence of the tiny visitor. She unfolded her delicate wings and rose from the night lily, floating into the air like a tiny, living star. She circled Pip gently, the warmth of her body brushing against his cheeks and warming the cool night air around them. Pip held out his tiny paw, his heart beating with soft excitement. Lumina drifted down and landed softly on Pip's outstretched paw, her tiny legs tickling his fur, her light shining brightly. Pip felt a deep, overwhelming sense of peace spread through him, all the tiredness and worry of his journey disappearing in an instant. He looked into the firefly's glowing light and saw reflections of the bright summer days that had passed, a beautiful tapestry of warmth and life that filled his soul. Lumina seemed to speak to Pip, not with words, but with gentle pulses of light that conveyed her thoughts directly to his heart. She showed him memories of the sun-drenched meadows, the buzzing bees, the tall green grass, and the warm summer rains. Pip understood that these memories were a precious gift, a reminder that summer would always exist within them, even during the coldest winter. The warmth was not lost, it was simply stored inside. Pip realized that he did not need to capture the firefly or bring her back to his home, her warmth was meant to be shared. He looked up at Lumina and whispered a soft thank you for her light and the beautiful memories she had shared. Lumina pulsed her golden light 3 times in a warm farewell, then rose from his paw and began to fly upward toward the canopy. Pip watched her go, his heart full. Lumina flew higher and higher, her golden light growing brighter until she looked like a miniature sun rising in the night sky. When she reached the level of the treetops, she paused, and then released a great, silent burst of golden stardust. The stardust drifted outward in all directions, a gentle shower of light that floated down through the branches and settled over the entire forest. It was a beautiful, shimmering curtain of warmth. The golden dust touched every tree, every leaf, and every sleeping creature, leaving behind a lingering sense of summer's gentle warmth. Throughout the whispering woods, the animals in their cozy burrows and nests felt the warmth and curled up tighter, drifting into deeper, sweeter dreams. The chill of the autumn night was gone, replaced by a comfortable, sleepy warmth that promised a safe transition into the winter season. The forest was ready. Pip watched the last of the golden dust fade into the mossy ground, feeling the peaceful sleepiness of the woods settle into his own bones. He thanked Celeste, who was still perched on the arch, and began his journey back down the hill toward his home. The walk back was easy and warm, the path illuminated by a gentle, natural light that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The forest was quiet, wrapped in a peaceful dream. As Pip walked past the hollow birch tree, he saw that Barnaby, the old badger, had finished his tea and closed his door. Inside, Barnaby was tucked safely under his heavy patchwork quilt, his breathing slow and even as he drifted into his long winter sleep. The tiny red scarf was hung neatly on a wooden peg, and the clay mug was clean and dry on the counter. The badger's home was warm and quiet. Pip continued along the path, looking up to see Oliver, the small screech owl, perched on a high branch of a pine tree. Oliver's golden yellow eyes were half closed, and he looked down at the tiny mouse with a slow, sleepy blink of approval. Oliver then tucked his head beneath his soft, mottled brown wing, his nightly watch completed now that the forest was safe. The owl let out one final, soft hoot before falling asleep. At the whispering stream, the water flowed silently, the ripples still reflecting the silver moon but now carrying a hint of golden warmth. Kalen, the otter, was curled up in his cozy nest of dry grass and reeds on the bank, his tail tucked over his nose. He was fast asleep, his breathing soft and rhythmic, dreaming of sunny rivers and playful summer days. The stream flowed past him like a quiet lullaby. Pip finally reached the roots of his own ancient oak tree, his heart filled with a deep, contented peace as he stepped inside. He took off his moss-green leaf cloak and hung it carefully on its peg, his journey completed and the forest safe. He looked around his cozy hollow, which felt warmer and more inviting than ever before, the scent of lavender filling the air. He was ready for his own rest. Pip crawled into his snug bed of thistledown and dried flower petals, pulling a soft green leaf blanket up to his chin. He closed his eyes and listened to the gentle sighing of the wind in the oak branches above, a sound that felt like a mother's lullaby. The memory of luminous golden light warmed him from the inside out, making him feel safe and protected. He drifted off into a deep, peaceful sleep. The last firefly of summer had completed her task, leaving behind a legacy of warmth that would carry the forest through the cold months ahead. In his cozy nest, Pip dreamed of sunny meadows and dancing lights, knowing that summer would return when the time was right. The whispering woods lay silent and peaceful under the starlit sky, wrapped in a warm, gentle slumber that would last until the spring. As the moon climbed to its highest point, the night-blooming jasmine slowly closed its petals, its work done for the night. The mist in the valleys settled softly, like a velvet blanket laid over the sleeping earth. The stars continued to shine, silent guardians of the forest's deep rest, their light steady and cold in the sky. But beneath the canopy, the air remained warm and sweet, filled with the quiet breath of sleeping creatures. Pip took a deep, relaxed breath in his sleep, his tiny whiskers twitching as he chasing golden sparks through green meadows in his dreams. The warmth of the firefly lived on in every heart in the forest, a quiet promise of the cycle of life. There was no fear of the coming winter, only gratitude for the beautiful summer that had passed and the peaceful rest that lay ahead. The woods slept, and all was well. The ancient oak tree stood tall and strong, its deep roots holding the earth secure, its branches whispering secrets to the passing clouds. Inside its roots, the tiny harvest mouse slept on, safe and warm in his thistledown bed. The seasons would change, the snow would fall, and the ice would cover the stream, but the spark of summer was safe. The light had been shared, the promise kept, and the long night was beautiful. The stars blinked in silent agreement, their silver light weaving through the canopy to touch the forest floor with gentle sparkles. The wind carried the last scent of jasmine away into the night, leaving behind only the pure, clean smell of the sleeping woods. Every breath of the forest was a quiet sigh of peace, a gentle rhythm that beat in time with the turning of the earth. The dream was complete. In the valleys and the hills, in the burrows and the hollows, the quiet warmth remained, a silent shield against the winter chill. Luminous Spark would sleep too, resting in the heart of the night lily until the warm breeze of spring called her forth once more. But for now, it was time to rest, to let the mind wander through starlit meadows and quiet streams. The long sleep had begun, beautiful and deep. The night wore on, the hours sliding by in silent procession, the peace of the forest unbroken by any sound. Pip turned slightly, pulling the green leaf blanket tighter around his shoulders, a soft sigh escaping his tiny lips. He was warm, he was safe, and the entire forest was asleep beside him. The journey was over, the work was done, and the night was filled with quiet, starlit peace. The silver moth Celeste folded her wings, resting quietly on the stone arch. The stream burbled on, carrying the golden warmth into the roots of the reeds and the willows. The entire forest, from the smallest leaf to the oldest stone, was wrapped in a blanket of silent, starlit peace. Summer's last firefly had brought the gift of warmth, and winter's sleep would be gentle. In the morning, the dew would freeze into delicate silver crystals, and the leaves would wear a coat of frost. But inside the burrow, and under the roots, and deep in the hollows, the warmth would remain, a tiny spark of summer waiting for the spring. Pip slept on, his breath soft and even, safe and loved. The long night was peaceful, and all was well in the Whispering Woods. The cycle of the seasons continued, a slow and beautiful dance that had played out for thousands of years. Each change brought its own gifts, its own quiet times, and its own songs. Pip's dream was just one of many, a gentle story whispered by the forest to the sky. And so, the forest slept, warm and secure under the starlit canopy. As the final stars began to pale in the pre-dawn sky, a single golden spark drifted from the canopy, landing softly in the snow-white moss. It was a reminder of the warm light, a promise that summer's heart would never truly fade. The story was written, the quest was complete, and the dream would live on. The end.